получилось так, что проблема с картами, и я не смог эти деньги достать. Мне поставили ультиматум, что 29 числа мы едем на задачу, 29 декабря. Меня там обнулят, потому что я не смогу выхватить миллион.
Hi guys, I'm Seth, welcome back to Warthog Defense. We have the newest update here about the situation in Ukraine and in the brutal reality of the Russia's war against Ukraine. Some of the greatest threats to Russian soldiers aren't Ukrainian bullets, but their own commanders. A shocking practice known as zeroing out has reportedly claimed the lives of countless troops executed by their own side as punishment or to silence dissent. This isn't just military discipline gone rogue, it's a window into the rot, fear and criminal culture eating away at the Russian army from within. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of Russian soldiers have been executed by their own side during the war in Ukraine, a practice called zeroing out or resetting to zero. It's not just a disciplinary measure, but a reflection of rampant corruption and criminality in the army. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of Russian soldiers have been executed by their own side during the war in Ukraine, a practice called zeroing out or resetting to zero. It's not just a disciplinary measure, but a reflection of rampant corruption and criminality in the army. The First World War, United States 11 men, Germany 48, British Empire 307, France 650, Austria-Hungary 1148, Russian Empire 10,000 to 20,000. Second World War, British Empire 40, France 100, United States 102, Japan several thousand, Nazi Germany 15,000 to 20,000. Soviet Union at least 157,593. Up to 2,000 soldiers were also reportedly executed in the 1979-1989 Soviet-Afghan War. Executions were also commonly used by the Russian army in the Crimean War in the 1850s, where the majority of the soldiers were conscripted serfs and harsh discipline was the norm. Commanders sometimes ordered attacks on their own units as a form of punishment. During the first 2 years of the war in Ukraine, the Wagner Group became notorious for its extreme brutality towards its own members. It already had a reputation for performative executions in Syria, as the thread below documents. Wagner used sledgehammers for public executions, most notoriously in the case of a deserter named Yevgeny Nudzin, whose skull was crushed on camera in November 2022. Commemorative sledgehammers were later gifted to Wagner members and Russian politicians. Wagner members were forced to join the regular Russian army following their failed June 2023 uprising. Whether coincidentally or not, reports of executions and murders have increased steadily since then, to the point that they are now published virtually daily. Zeroing out may mean being executed directly or indirectly by being sent into an unsurvivable assault. At least one field execution has been captured on a drone video, showing one Russian soldier shooting another several times at point-blank range. Others, such as the man shown at the top of this thread, who was hanged for desertion, have been publicly executed as a warning to others. This was a common Wagner practice, which also involves showing videos of executions to new recruits as a warning against disobedience. A big difference between the Soviet era and now is that extrajudicial executions are almost entirely confined to common soldiers. In only the first year of the Soviet-German War, 107 senior officers were arrested for various political and military offenses. They included a marshal, 72 generals, 6 admirals and commanders of divisions and head of political staffs. 45 were sentenced to be shot, including 34 generals. 10 more died while under arrest. 12% of all senior Soviet officers killed in the war were executed. They were shot for suspected disloyalty, failure to achieve objectives, theft, drunkenness, and very rarely punishment for crimes against their own men, such as shooting them randomly while drunk. Nowadays, officers appear to have a virtual impunity to commit such offenses. While extrajudicial execution is formally prohibited in the modern Russian army, as one soldier says, the closer to the front line, the fewer rules and the more permissiveness. For any major mistake, they could reset your score. There are no laws there. The threat of zeroing is closely linked to officer criminality in the army. In this video, two soldiers say that they face being executed by their commander if they do not pay him 1,000,000 rubles, 12,800 from their injury compensation payments. Another soldier has described how he had to pay a $38,000 bribe to be evacuated from the battlefield after being wounded, with the prospect of being zeroed out if he didn't pay up. Little extortion of this kind appears to be commonplace. Chat messages between husbands and wives say that zeroing is everywhere. Natalia says that her husband was zeroed out for refusing to pay a bribe to avoid being sent to assault a town from which few returned alive. Another widow says that for refusing to collect money to buy drones, they threw him in the very ass. It turns out that they zeroed out the inconvenient one. Nadezhda's husband refused to give his injury compensation money to his commander. As a result, he was sent to his death in Bakhmut. His last message to his wife was, "Zaya, I won't be back. They're taking us away now to zero out." As in the Crimean War, there have been reports of commanders deliberately attacking their own units to enforce their orders. In October 2024, soldiers spoke of having defending themselves from attacks by both the Ukrainians and their own commander. Our battalion commander began to wipe out our fighters a few days ago, literally committing lynching, killing our people. He kills the boys because they refuse to move forward, because they lose 9% of their personnel every time they go. Zeroing is often used to retaliate against men who complain against their officers. In one instance, all but one of a group of men who recorded an appeal saying their commanders planned to murder them were reportedly subsequently murdered by their commanders. Other soldiers have been executed for using drugs or alcohol, stealing from others, or even mobilized soldiers refusing to sign a contract to join the army permanently. The killers are not just commanders, but sometimes their own comrades, enforcing a harsh discipline. Reportedly, the format of such killings is often that soldiers are taken by aides of the commander to frontline positions where they are shot or grenaded, ensuring that they become just another anonymous corpse on the line of contact. Alexander Semenov of the I Want to Find project says, when there are signs of torture or other violence on the body, burial in unmarked graves, burning or blowing up the remains is practiced. This allows the command to reliably hide the traces of the crimes committed. I Want to Find has reported the existence of so-called funeral squads in some units. The 15th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade reportedly created one such squad to secretly remove the bodies of those executed or who died under torture and bury them in unmarked graves. Many soldiers have reported that the wounded are frequently shot, sometimes as mercy killings, but more often to ensure that casualties do not impede assaults or distract men into trying to evacuate them. A Russian soldier describes one such instance in the August 2024 capture of Novokhodivka. When we were running along the forest plantation, there were two people with us. One of them was a drug addict, the other was just out of the hospital, his lung was punctured. They were barely running at the very end and slowed down the entire column. The escort stopped and ran last. As soon as we entered the city, I heard two shots from behind. Then the escort caught up with us and said that those two had got lost somewhere. I never saw them again. Zeroing does not always mean direct murder. More often it involves sending men into unsurvivable situations, such as assaulting Ukrainian positions without support or occasionally without body armor or even weapons. This is reported frequently. A follow-up strike on July 3rd targeted a production facility at PAE Energia in Russia's Lipetsk region. Satellite imagery reveals that the building's roof, previously repaired after an earlier attack, was once again damaged. Partisan movement AESH reports that partisans torched an Akhmat vehicle in occupied Mariupol overnight, The operation was carried out while the Russians were inside a nearby building. Tucker Carlson has called for stripping US citizenship from those fighting in foreign wars, specifically mentioning Americans fighting for Ukraine and Israel. You cannot be a US citizen and simultaneously fight for another country's interests, he said.
I think it's a huge problem. I think anybody, by the way, who serves in a foreign military should lose his citizenship immediately. There are a lot of Americans who've served in the IDF. They should lose their citizenship. There's a lot of Americans who've served in Ukraine, and they should lose their citizenship. You can't fight for another country and remain an American, period.
Overnight, Russian forces struck a hospital in Slovyansk with the Shahed drone. A kindergarten, several apartment blocks and private homes were also damaged in the attack. Russia's systematic targeting of civilian infrastructure in Ukraine has become a defining feature of its brutal war strategy. Homes, hospitals, schools and power stations are hit not by accident but by design, part of a campaign to terrorize the population and break morale. Missiles and drones strike far from the front lines, killing children, displacing families and leaving entire cities without power or water. It's not just warfare, it's state-sponsored terror.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you want to support Warthog Defense, please become our member and get early access to new videos, exclusive members-only videos, and become administrator in comment section. The membership link is in the description.
Rescues every day. We had a guy last week at 6 rescues in 6 days. You know, he's doing the job every day.